Hi, I'm Trevor Greenberg. I'm about to be on the online prosperity. We'll be talking about what it is that a PM actually does all day and the nuances of how getting your kids ready for school is a project every day. And are you the PM or are you not the PM? So tune in and find out the answers to these questions and more.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place for exclusive, no BS solutions and methods that actually work. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And in every episode, we really try and dig into the real pains, whether it's career setbacks, project chaos, or fear of instability, and we bring you insights that actually solve this problem. And our guest today is Trevor Greenberg. Now, Trevor, how are you doing, my man?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I am doing fantastic. I actually wanted to start off by saying thank you for your service and everything else that you're doing, bringing joy and order into people's work, with the work that you're doing right now.
I'm trying to.
Great stuff. For those that are meeting Trevor for the very first time, let me just take you from underneath that internet rock you've been hiding under. So Trevor Greenberg is the brains behind the Disgruntled PM Podcast and also process-driven performance coaching. Now, Trevor has turned his frustrations with scope creep, endless meetings, and that dreaded being a good idea fairy syndrome into strategic leadership opportunities. And he actually uses clear strategies and, as you have noticed, with a dose of humor. So hopefully you're not going to be taking yourself too seriously while listening to this podcast, because Trevor is literally going to be breaking that pattern for you. But also to set the tone, Trevor, I got to ask you, how does somebody go from lifting heavy things or lifting weights to now lifting multi-million-dollar project plans? I mean, it's a big difference. There must have been a lot of scope creep happening in between, right?
Actually, it was a little bit weird because I didn't really get into working out until after I got out of the military. I was working in an office job and I was a PM. I was doing Six Sigma coaching. And I've stumbled onto this podcast about weightlifting and I'm like, oh, I got to learn to do this. And then fast forward a little bit, I decided we just bought our first house and I was like, well, I can't work out in a commercial gym anymore because what broke me was I was squatting on a squat rack. I left to go get more weight because I don't know how gyms are in Australia, but in the US, a lot of times they have different brands of plates, and anybody who works out knows your plates have to be matching, right? You have to have the same brand plates on both sides. Otherwise it's just not right. So I went to go get more weight, came back and I watched somebody take weight off my bar and I said, I can't do this anymore. And the day after we closed on our house, I had 3 pallets from Rogue Fitness delivering equipment to my house. And I've been a garage gym lifter ever since for almost 12 years.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing that happens when you show up in a place and you're just trying to mind your own business. And there's that one person who wants to fit in like a little Goldilocks.
Well, it goes way beyond that. And anybody in the home gym hobby, and it is a hobby, don't get it twisted, it's a hobby, will say you buy the gym in your house for efficiency, not for cost savings. Because you talked at the beginning about process improvement, right? Well, I did the math on it and I was spending probably 20 minutes driving to and from the gym each way. You spend another 20 minutes inside the gym going from the check-in desk to put your bag away, to get yourself ready. And then your half an hour to 45-minute workout takes you over an hour because you're usually waiting for equipment. socializing with people you don't want to talk to, all those things. So I figured out if I'm saving, we'll be conservative and say an hour a day in my workout by working out at home. The cost is irrelevant at that point because I'm also using equipment that I like, that's my choice. So I'm not having to, work with subpar equipment or equipment that doesn't fit my needs. And it's that process of how do I save time? Because I have two small kids. This was before I had kids, but now especially I've got two small children, and my gym never closes. It doesn't close on Christmas, doesn't close on New Year's, doesn't open up at 10 o'clock on the weekends. It's always there. I can go work out anytime I want. And when you start taking that into other parts of your life, you start thinking about where's the efficiency? Where is my return on investment? Because, I've told people I don't mow my lawn because I can spend $40 to have someone mow my lawn for me, or I can go buy a lawnmower and spend an hour a week mowing my yard. And I hate mowing my yard. So where do you think the return on investment for that $40 a week is?
I like that, because if you really look at it, that $40, it doesn't constitute the amount that you get paid at an hourly rate. So if you look at what your hourly rate is worth, and then you will be a very, 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 very underpaid professional there. But before we actually go into the whole process management and everything else that comes along with it, and you figuring out that, obviously setting up your gym at home is the way to go. What does life look like for Trevor Greenberg? I mean, there's a whole life behind being that organized, because not a lot of people will just look at weights and say, you know what, there's got to be another way.
Oh, I'm not organized at all in my life. It is chaos. I mean, let's be honest. You tell me you've got your life organized, I'm going to look at someone who's got nothing going on in their life, because we all are chaos in our own way.
Absolutely.
But I've got as I said, I've got a wife and two small kids. I do probably 20 different things. I'm active on LinkedIn. I've got my podcast. I try and get a workout in a day, and I'm getting better about that. There's all kinds of things that I'm working on, but it's not a function of just one thing that keeps me going, because I wrote about, I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn, as you said. And one of the things I wrote about was a friend of mine asked me this one day when I was talking to him, and said, I've been really busy. I haven't been this busy in forever. And he said, are you busy or are you productive? And it really took me down a rabbit hole, because I was like, that's a great question. We always talk about how busy we are, but are we productive? Are you busy means you're driving around in circles in a parking lot. Productive means you're going to the places you need to go to check off on your list. And I don't think enough people really look at their day and what they're working on and break it down in those concepts. Because if your day is full and you get to work and you blink and your day is over, it was a good day in your mind because you were busy. But did you do anything, or were you just running from meeting to meeting to meeting, sidebar to sidebar, status updates, and you just didn't even have time to eat lunch because you were so busy? But if you look back and audit your day, did you actually accomplish anything, or did you just do a bunch of busy work?
Absolutely. So we started off the call with obviously saying you are a veteran, and also you've been in, multiple roles, and you've had that fear of speaking on the internet. Maybe you can just walk us through those, fundamental or foundational sort of aspects of who you are, because then we can really, really catapult into why you have become who you are now.
Well, I started off with, we were talking before about, I started my podcast because I was terrified of getting on the internet and talking about stuff, and then having somebody in their mom's basement typing away saying, you don't know what you're talking about, Trevor's a moron. And I was telling a friend of mine that who's kind of a mentor, and he said, I'm going to challenge you right now to start a podcast. You have 30 days. And he's like, I'll even give you the topic to make your life a little easier. He said, you can call it I'm terrified, and all you do is talk to people about confronting their fears.
Right.
And then I wound up meeting someone. We decided to start the show together. It didn't work out. My former co-host had other things to focus on, and I took the show over as a solo host. But before that, I have two friends who both host shows, and I was like, "Can I get on your show?" Just to get out of that fear. But this was before we even decided to start my own show. And one does live exclusively, and then the other one, I didn't know if we were pre-recorded or live, but he's like, "Hey, you want to go live this morning?" It's like, "Okay, let's do it." What's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to call me an idiot. Okay, I've been called worse to my face, never mind on the internet.
Wow. I can only imagine. So many people are afraid. I think it was Seinfeld that said, some people would rather be the person that is in the coffin than be the person that is, saying out the eulogy. People are really confronted and afraid of speaking out in public. And what were the first sort of episodes like, for you when you?
Well, when I was doing the shows where I was the guest, it was friends. So I mean, it was fairly easy to do just because they were people that I talked to all the time anyway. So it was like just two friends having a conversation, except it was on the internet and it wasn't on the phone. And then when we went to the podcast with my former co-host, it was awkward for a lot of reasons, but I feel like I've kind of hit my stride as a host now that I've kind of built my voice, my audience, how I do my show, much like you. It takes some time to figure out where that message, where that push pull, so let me expand on that comes in.
Absolutely. But Trevor, you've probably seen the worst in life. I mean, from infantry NCO to 82nd Airborne, and you've led Fortune 500 projects. What's a microphone and a camera?
Well, it's different, because here what you say lives forever. It really does. Like it never goes away. We always hear our favorite podcast hosts always talking about how cringe their first couple of episodes were because they didn't know what they were doing.
Absolutely.
And even ones with hundreds of episodes, they still might not know what they're doing.
Absolutely. You see, unless they delete all of the internet, this is now etched in stone. And as I mentioned, whatever you're going to say can and will be used against you, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now and things of that nature. So, but doesn't that excite you that we're the most documented generation now that,
I'm not. My kids will be. But you brought up a point there that I wanted to kind of touch on is, yes, everything we have is documented, and dumb ideas that I say now can be held against me later. But that also doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to change my opinions or my mind and evolve as time goes on, or learn something new that may reshape what I thought of before. We're so focused on what we're saying now and how it'll be used against us later. How about thinking about how that can be a time capsule of what I thought of then, but is that what I think now?
Absolutely. Because, okay, let's maybe look at it in this perspective as well. In the military, whatever you do also has permanent results, because if it is maybe like a war or a confrontation with a country, that is part of history being made and things of that nature. Would you maybe take parallels from that, or is that completely different because there's a whole different world that what stays in battlegrounds might just maybe stay there, but what comes up on the internet can be researched?
Well, I'm reminded of a phrase that I've been using a lot lately, which is there's three sides to every story. my side, your side, and the truth. And usually the truth lies somewhere in between my story and your story. And when you start talking about war, that's a whole nother can of worms, because the other side has a say in the matter. You know, you talk about telling the story. I could tell you what I saw, but what I saw and what the enemy, and I'll use the enemy in loose terms, they saw, are totally different perspectives, because we're looking to achieve different goals. So one of the things I've actually coached, I was talking with a friend of mine and a couple of people actually, and one of my mentees I've been mentoring, I told him, before you start popping off with ideas, think about your audience and put yourself in their position hearing your ideas. Because you could think they're great, but they're going to look at you and they could say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because you've got blind spots that you're not thinking of because it's your idea and you think it's great.
While you're saying that, I was trying to figure out one of the figurines that's behind you there. And that's Dwight from The Office, right?
It is. Yep.
Right. And true to your point, right? You may have been obviously trying to say that, but so much is happening in your audience mind, because what I'm seeing is not what you're seeing. You actually had to look back, but that's what I'm focused on right now, and that's what I'm looking at. So,
well, there's a couple of things back there since you brought it up. There's also a bobblehead that my wife had made of me, right, inspired by Dwight from The Office.
Maybe we'll go into that. And then also, because there's also a bit of a similarity in the way Dwight sort of has and wants processes to be done, and everything has to be in a certain way and things of that nature. So, but Disgruntled PM Podcast, you said your friends sort of said, let's get you onto this, and you tried it with a partner and you landed on Disgruntled PM Podcast. Why that name?
Well, I actually explained this in one of my previous episodes, but one of the characteristics of being a project manager is nobody knows what it is that we do unless you're a PM. And I always say, my job is to make it look easy. I don't get the glory for the success. That goes to the stakeholders. I get all the blame when it fails because I'm supposed to be managing it. So we as a bunch are disgruntled because nobody knows what we do, and we're always being blamed for things that go wrong that are completely out of our control. So I kind of thought about it. I was like, every PM I know has some level of disgruntlement, and there's all kinds of happy, cheery, alliterative project management names, and I wanted it to be something that's a little entertaining, because that was my goal. Was it's your weekly therapy session for project management. It's not. I'll tell you, if you want to go learn how to pass the PMP, I will tell you 4 or 5 other people to go talk to, and don't listen to mine, because I will not teach you how to pass the PMP. That's not what I do. I bring on experts in the real world to talk about how to make you a better PM using the other people's expertise.
You know what I like about that? People that are on the outside, we don't notice certain things until there's a mistake or an error. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in the area that I live, we're in a fairly newly established neighborhood, and there's always roadworks that are happening. There's always upgrades, traffic lights being fixed, and new buildings popping up every single time. Now that you've mentioned, behind all of these projects, there is a project manager who is making sure that there's the traffic controllers, all the shops have been made aware of what's happening, the project runs on time, and it goes in as scheduled. I can only imagine.
Well, let me take it one step further for you, because the road that my wife and I take our kids to school on has had construction for the last year. And this is a main road feeding into our kids' school. And the rule is they cannot start work until 9 a.m. because they've got to be able to allow for people coming and going to work and also school traffic. Now, if you're the project manager, you're thinking, man, that cuts my day down because I want to get those guys working. If they start at 9, that's probably 2 or 3 hours later than what they normally would start. And in order for them to get prepped, they're prepping in the middle of rush hour in the morning. So, because you want to start right at 9, you don't want to have them setting up at 9. You want to be starting at 9. So you've got probably one of the two most dangerous times of day is when they're setting up for the day. Now, how do you manage risk in that aspect as a PM? And let's say that this construction was supposed to end at the end of summer. So the road was ready to go for the school year. What happens if you're delayed? What happens if it rained, if the weather didn't cooperate? All kinds of variables that you can't control. And then you can't speed it up because guess what? Laying asphalt has a timeline. There's budget constraints of you might not be able to you can't throw money at the problem to make it solved, even if you could. There's all these different things that go on in the background. That's a dance that this is all stuff that the PM is managing, not the workers.
So from our own understanding of what PMs are, they're not just order takers. They're literally running the show. But obviously...
Yeah, and here's the difference. I've kind of coined this phrase, and I don't know if I stole it from someone or if it's something that I just came up with, but I say there's project managers and managers of projects. A project manager, by PMI's definition, PMI is the governing body for the PMP and all other certifications. A project manager is responsible for the work being done. They are not the ones doing the work. So an example I like to use is getting my kids to school in the morning. If I'm up and I'm making sure that my wife takes care of getting them breakfast, I make sure that she's got all the stuff that she needs, all the breakfast foods, all the medicine is there, all of their clothes are out, all that stuff is available to her. And she's the one doing the work and getting them ready for school and then she drives them to school and I stay at home. I managed the project of getting the kids to school. I was the project manager because I made sure she had everything she needed. I oversaw it. And if she needs help, let's say one kid spills something on himself and the other one needs help with, I don't know, getting dressed. Okay, I can step in and help her, but it's not my job to be making sure that everything is done by me as the PM. They are responsible for making sure the work gets done, not making sure they do the work.
Okay. And obviously with how projects run, when things then go wrong, that's when the blame comes in now, because then...
Well, and Ed, let's take that previous example again. Let's say my daughter wants, I don't know, some type of, or we'll use my son because it's an easier one. He wants a certain kind of breakfast bar, and we don't have that. And she went to the store yesterday. In this example, that's on me because I didn't make sure that was on the list to make sure that we had it available for him to have in the morning. I didn't, in project management speak, I did not see the risk of running out of his favorite breakfast bar, and I did not mitigate it by putting it on the list to get more.
Absolutely. And well, isn't that where scope creep now starts coming in? Where, okay, I did what I was...
Okay, we'll take scope creep in this example. Now my son says, I want a breakfast bar and I want cereal.
All right.
And I want chocolate milk. Okay. Normally he gets 2 bars. Now he wants cereal too. Now we've entered scope creep into the mix because now breakfast is bigger than usual.
Right.
Or we have to leave, they're getting ready for school and it's cold outside, so they need a jacket. Now they need a jacket? Do they need gloves? Do they need a hat? All of that is scope creep, because by definition, we're just trying to get them to school. We didn't say they needed to be to school and dressed. If we said dressed appropriately for the weather, now that's not scope creep, because that's in scope, but we have to change our scope to be able to make that work. Because the original plan was get the kids up, get them dressed, get them fed, and get them to school, right?
So by definition, everyone is a project manager then.
Well, now we're going to get into a very controversial take that I have, because I despise that term.
All right.
Remember I said project managers and managers of projects.
Managers of projects, yes.
A project manager is a trained professional. This is what they do. I tell people all the time, project management is its own discipline for a reason. When I hear someone tell me I do sales, I do consulting, I do project management, I do 5 other things, I look at them and I say, oh, so you do nothing. Because you don't specialize in anything, which means you know a lot about a little bit. Or no, you don't. Yeah, you know a lot about a little bit, but you don't know a lot about a little bit. I messed that one up, I'm sure. There we go. There's your first blooper soundbite.
All right. Well, we'll just put that in the scope creep pile, of the things that were.
I'll do one better. I messed up by not using my go-to analogy, which is I would rather be a mile deep and an inch wide in my knowledge than a mile wide and an inch deep. Because if I know, like I'll start in project meetings with, I am the dumbest person in this room because my expertise is in project management, and that's it. I am not a subject matter expert in most of what I work on with projects, and I don't need to be. That's why I've got a team.
Now, would this then explain why it was somehow difficult and nerve-wracking for you to start the podcast? Because you would have put yourself in a position that I'm not an expert when it comes to podcasting.
Well, I actually, funny enough, I used my skill set to build the podcast. Because everything I did, I just treated the whole thing like a project. My entire guest scheduling system is a giant Kanban board.
Right.
Because that's what I know. There's so many people that I've heard have come to me and said, oh, well, I've thought about starting a podcast, this and that. I'm like, okay, what's stopping you? It's easier now than ever to start one. The technology far surpasses anything anyone could ever think of for ease of use. The only thing that stops people from doing it is that fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, fear of whatever it may be, or putting effort forth to do something rather than just say, I got an idea and that's it.
Right. So from my understanding of what you're saying there is, it's like a bird. And we've got a saying like this in my African culture, that a bird is not worried about the strength of the twig it's going to be standing on. And half of the time, I don't know if you've noticed, some birds would have been standing on a twig, and the moment they fly away, the twig actually breaks. It's not because they are looking for balance from the twig, but they are confident of the wings that they have because they could always fly away. Would that be the case in your approach into? Well,
I would use more of the cat analogy of, we've all seen the videos of the cat that jumps, and you watch the video and you're like, oh no, he's going to fall. And their paws hit the counter, hit the head and fall down, but they bounce right back and move on. You don't know what you don't know. Like, we have a saying in project management called unknown unknowns.
Right.
And it's obvious. They're things you can't plan for because you could have never thought of them. And podcasting, writing content on LinkedIn, doing anything, there's a learning curve. And the hardest part is starting and then being consistent with it.
Is there never going to be an endpoint? I mean, like with a project, there's always the cutting of the ribbon, or the first train goes through the tracks, and then you officially say that this is finished. You know, is there a point where you would say, you know what, I did it? You know?
Well, if that was the case, I'd say I've already done it because I've already put out 11 episodes of my solo show plus previous episodes. You know, I've got a lot of content banked. But one thing that you forget about, or that going back to the lesser known part of project management, once that ribbon is cut, that doesn't mean the project's done and we're moving on. There's sustainment phases, there's corrections, there's afterwork. It's always being monitored and controlled as part of the process. So, you look at it, we'll take a train and going through a tunnel. Okay, well, the train still has to have a maintenance schedule, right? They still have to have a ticketing system to be able to buy the tickets, staff it, schedule for the train conductors, all the stuff that goes along with that is part of the monitor and control phase, because they're not going to get it right the first time. I don't care how experienced they are. There's going to be a learning curve after the fact.
That brings me back to Melbourne again. They're digging tunnels under the city, which are going to be like a new train network and stuff like that. But once you're speaking like that, they've been testing the trains, but the trains have been going empty. And I'm just thinking to myself, what if the trains are now full of people? Would that create a whole different...
Oh, absolutely it will. Because think about it this way. How many times have you gone on public transit and the bus driver is about, and that one person sticks their hand in and says, wait! And then you do that 3 or 4 times on a route, they're no longer on time.
And yeah, because then that human factor is never, put into calculation and things of that nature.
Even if it is, you can never get it right, because it's going to change. It's a variable. It's going to change every day. We complain about doctors' offices all the time. I don't know if it's the same way in Australia, and I'm pretty sure it is, because my brother and his wife lived in Canberra for a while. But how often do you get the nurse coming out to you and say, well, the doctor's running late today because 3 patients were late? And I encountered this when I was at the doctor a couple weeks ago. They told me that because I was at the VA, they're required to be seen if you show up less than 15 minutes late. Meaning if you show up 14 minutes late for your appointment, they are required to see you.
Because you're still within the sort of
15 minutes. So, we're talking about these cascading and downstream effects. But let's say that happens at 8 a.m., you're off all day. What happens if you're on time all the way through lunch, and then the doctor comes back from lunch late, and then patients show up late?
How about in the world that we live in now, Trevor, where every stakeholder thinks they're informed and they know what should be happening, especially when it comes to, Chat GPT, and everybody comes in with...
I have a funny story about that, actually. This is a guy, one of my guests. I've known this guy for over 25 years. Me and him went to undergraduate school together. So I've known this guy a long time. And he's a CEO, or he was a CEO at a big investment real estate company. And he was telling me he does a lot of mentoring with new college graduates, and he's like, they are all about the AI. They know everything. They know all about the tech. They know all of it. He goes out to lunch with his peers, other CEOs, and they couldn't even spell Chat GPT.
Right.
He's like, they don't even know how to work their phones half the time. And this is the dynamic that we have. And I used to say that I grew up seeing the most technological evolution in life, because I grew up pre-internet with dial-up internet, all that, pre-cell phones, and I got to see all of it happen right in front of my eyes. Like I remember that I had a Nokia brick phone. You know,
Those
the
were the
one with
days.
those little Nokia phones that we used to pay the $10 and have like 20 different colored faceplates for with Snake on it. Yeah, I had that too. And you know, now we look at iPhones and my nephew, we went to, this is going back a couple of years, but my nephew, who I think he was 5 or 6 at the time, we went to a family get together at a state park down by the river. And he goes up to my wife, and the first thing he asks her is, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" And in true my wife fashion, she looks at him and says, "It's go be a kid and play."
I like that. I think I should change my password to go be a kid. For
Well,
all the
my
little cousins that come and want to just use the internet.
my guest network is get off my LAN.
Woo! That is amazing. That is amazing. But you know, when it comes to obviously project management, like we're saying, they are the backbone to make sure everything is happening smoothly, but they get the least amount of credit. How does one literally demand what they're worth? Because if they're not there, things don't move and things of that nature. Not necessarily demand, but how do somebody who is in that position really adopt a mindset of their work matters in this space?
Lots of therapy.
So they need to listen
No,
to your podcast
no,
then.
no, no, no. I think that it goes back to that concept of project managers and managers of projects. You know,
Right.
project managers, in my mind, are professionals. We are professionals at our craft of project management. We're educated, we have experience, we know what we're doing. And as I said, we make it look easy. And everything you just talked about, you described a project manager because we don't need the credit for everything that we did because we're never going to get it. And if we do get it, then we're loudmouths and being cocky and, you know, all that stuff. But what we do is we make the job look easy. And that's where the skill set comes in because there's a ton of soft skills that are never mentioned in any of the books that PMs just learn through trial and error. Like we are, by definition, we are communicators.
Right.
I say we're conduits of information upstream and downstream because I have to be able to talk to the most technical of technical subject matter experts and then take what they told me and translate that to somebody who just wants high level details of, are we on budget? Are we on task? Did Steve get that? Did Steve working with you? You know, and everywhere in between because we lead through influence. We don't lead through authority.
Right. So if you're somebody that has a language love of praise and wants people to acknowledge you, then being a PM is not the job for you.
Probably not. Probably not. Because as I said, you know, it's very, how many times have you actually heard somebody explain what a PM does in English that you go, oh, that makes sense?
It's it's not an easy one because we just understand project managers as somebody who has a clipboard, ticks some boxes that the people are there on time, things are moving, all the supplies are needed, and then he goes back to his kids and maybe goes and lifts heavy things.
And that's the furthest thing from the truth because, you know, I've said a monkey can check off lists. And they're getting pretty smart now, so they probably could literally do that.
you know.
But you know, how do you know, not just taking aside the, are you on scope, or are you in scope, on budget, on schedule? Let's take the iron triangle and pick that up and put that off to the side. It's, can you communicate with people? Can you talk to them? Do you know how to lead people without having that title? Because as PMs, we very rarely own the resources we're utilizing. Most of my projects, every resource I've had, and by resource I mean subject matter expert, team member, any of the people that are working on my projects don't work for me. They still have bosses that they report to, and I've got to go talk to their boss if I need anything extra out of them than what they agreed to. You know, they're on my projects as additional duties. They're not just doing that because that's what they're assigned to me, and I'm their boss.
So as you're saying, and as I'm gathering, most of these things, you actually have to manage your career like a project manager, because some of these things are not taught in a textbook. You can't just go in with textbook knowledge and expect to actually achieve,
Well, I've got a couple of, I'll call them Trevorisms that I say all the time. You know, the project management is its own discipline for a reason is one of them. And I also say they're called best practices for a reason, but they're also not called all the times for a reason. You know, you learn best practices in the book studying for the certifications.
Right.
Because you have to know the basics of how to manage a project. But you also have to know what a real project is outside of the glass cage that is ideal circumstances in the book. Because the book doesn't paint the picture of you've got a stakeholder who hates you. Or you've got the stakeholder who's constantly coming up to you telling you how you can improve the project. You know, we talk about what scope creep is, but we don't actually define it in the book. Like that whole exercise we did earlier about getting the kids to school. That is a project because it, by definition, has defined start, finish, and stated goals. And it's a unique endeavor. You know, the start of the project is when the kids wake up. The end of the project is when you drop them off at school. And the unique endeavor is we're getting them to school. Every day is different. You know, one morning you could have a meltdown because the bar on my kid's breakfast bar is a little bit too dark, or we don't have the cereal that they want, or any other variable could be entered in that's different from the day before, because no 2 days are the same. Just like no two projects are the same.
Can only imagine that. And obviously, you know, when people show up, what are you helping them with these days?
Well, I do consulting and coaching for project management. So, you know, I've done some process improvement as well for some clients. I've had a couple of different clients that they needed some help with building better processes, building repeatable processes, just improving, making their lives easier. Because going back to that mowing your lawn example, they don't know it. They don't know this stuff because that's not what they do. You know, I've spent a lot of time learning about process improvement and Six Sigma certifications, but that also means I spent a lot of time not learning about other things because I was learning about that. So I try to stay in my lane in terms of expertise. And that's part of the reason why I worry a little bit about being requoted on the internet out of context. But I also know that if you're going to quote me, you're going to quote me. You know, if you're going to, I've made some posts on LinkedIn where the Agile Warriors came out, and the next week I just made a comment that said, okay, so we got a lot of traffic from Agile passionate people about this. So this week I'm going to make it a little bit more generic, more broad, and try not to make anyone mad. You know,
Did you manage that, you know, in that sort of way? Yeah. And where can people go to and maybe learn a little bit more, or maybe get the so much needed therapy that you mentioned about, especially if they're project managers themselves?
Yeah, the Disgruntled PM podcast is available anywhere where you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all those places. If you want to watch the videos of me and my guests, they're on YouTube as well. And occasionally we have Easter eggs in the video because the guests might be showing things, or I might have been provided some stuff to show that are visuals that can help with the show too. And then if they
Absolutely.
want to find me and my consulting stuff, just reach out on LinkedIn. I don't know if there's another Trevor Greenberg, but I'm the one with bacon in my name.
Absolutely. I'll definitely make sure that all those links are in the show notes. And true to, yeah, there is the bacon lover bit.
And one more thing too is I also have a Patreon for the show
Mm.
because every guest that I have on, I record about a 20-minute bonus episode that's behind the paywall for the drinking the Kool-Aid level at $5 a month. And what that
Okay.
is, that's 20 minutes of bonus content with my guest, but it's not the casual conversation. It's me picking their brain for their expertise and actually asking them for their expertise.
Okay.
You know, I had on when I had on that CEO, I was asking him, what are things that people need to know? Actually, we'll back that up to I had on a executive. His name is Ed Bacco. He was one of my bosses. He worked for Amazon. He's retired out of the Navy. He ran a Homeland Security center in the US. And, I asked him, I was like, the whole conversation focused around from the executive side, what PMs don't see in the world of executive politics. And I was asking him, I'm like, hey, you're the executive stakeholder. What are some things I need to know about? What am I not seeing? What causes that good idea fairy for you to come to me with that good idea fairy? Because it doesn't start with him just having an idea walking from his office. There's always something that prompts it, and it's usually higher up, internal politics, all kinds of other things. And that's what I pull out of my guests because I have some amazing friends, some amazing guests on. And yeah, we can talk and have a good conversation on the show, but I also want to tap them for their expertise. But that's also a way to have the audience help support the show because I'm sure as you know, these things aren't free.
I
So
need a project manager to make sure that we
so
stay
so
on
the
budget.
goal so the goal for the Patreon, and I call those interviews the postmortem interviews. The goal for
Mm,
the show is to sustain the costs for the show. It's not to get me rich, to retire or anything else. It's just help offset the costs of everything because running a podcast isn't free and it's not cheap.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, see, from that alone, I've just actually learned something different. So thank you so much. And I'll put all the links
Yeah.
to the show notes. And obviously, if you can supply us even the Patreon link, I'll
Yes.
be more than happy to get that going there. Now, Trevor, I mean, obviously, you know, with everything, there's a time limit, there's a start, there's an end to a project and things of that nature. But there's something that I really wanted to ask you about the Tennessee records that can no longer be broken. I mean, that alone just really, yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So I used to compete in the sport of Olympic style weightlifting. I
Mm,
did not compete in the Olympics. I was nowhere near that level, but that's the sport is Olympic weightlifting.
right.
And the gym that I went to was sanctioned to set Tennessee state records in competitions. So I competed and I set three records in I can't remember what weight class it is now, but it was the males 35 to 40 in the weight class. And then the governing body, both for the U.S. and for the global Olympics, they reflagged weight classes and they changed them around. So then, following that, I competed again, and I set three more Tennessee state records in the 35 to 40 weight class. You know, I used to listen to a weightlifting coach that said the longer the title, the less impressive the less impressive it actually is, but the more impressive it sounds. But when they changed all the weight classes, that one weight class that I had set all those records in was now set in stone. Those books can't be opened unless they reopen that weight class.
Wow.
So that weight class is locked in stone forever unless USA Weightlifting or the International Weightlifting Committee decides to reopen that weight class and somebody recompetes that's age 35 to 40 in that weight class in the state of Tennessee at a sanctioned event.
All right. Well, guess what you have just done right now? We've actually locked in this moment in history. Unless somebody deletes it on the internet or the internet is deleted, then obviously we won't have this. But I really appreciate the time that you spend with me on the call today. I mean, your life story and your experience and everything else in between, just really sheds light into, aspects of project management that a lot of people had not been paying attention to. But now that you've brought us into your world, what's next? What can we anticipate or help you celebrate in the future that we can be on the lookout for?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing. I'm building my LinkedIn presence. Obviously, I continue to put out content multiple times a week, and a lot of it is entertaining, educational. I cannot stand the boring thought leadership pieces out there. I put out a piece called "Servant Leadership is Dead," because we've turned that term into a buzzword and it doesn't mean anything anymore. Everybody's a servant leader, which means nobody is.
I like the edutainment spin that you're putting into this, because people are coming to the internet to get information, to be entertained, and to get stuff. And if they're getting all those hits from the one place, then obviously they stick around a little bit longer, So,
and I learned this fairly recently through somebody that I've learned to become a friend, is we don't have to take ourselves so seriously on LinkedIn. It is a professional platform, but that doesn't mean that we have to be wearing ascots and bow ties. We can have fun, we can be entertaining, and you can put a silly post up there. I've seen I've gotten connected into this group of people that's just the most random stuff that gets posted. And I just look at it and I go, okay, and I comment and I play along with the game on some of the comments just because why not?
Absolutely.
What's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to see that I'm sarcastic?
Well, you need to be serious if you're going to be running projects, so just in case,
you don't need to be serious to run projects, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You need to know when to be serious.
Absolutely.
Because like I said, I will say I'm the dumbest person in the room, and that starts at the top.
I appreciate that. Now, Trevor, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. And for those that are watching and listening, wasn't that a ride? I mean, from military discipline to multi-million-dollar projects to podcasts named the Disgruntled PM, and also holding unbreakable weightlifting records. That in and of itself is something else, right? So if this episode made you nod, smile, or maybe rethink your own path, I encourage you to share it with somebody who could use a dose of realness, or maybe transformation in their career, the way they run things, or the way they handle themselves on LinkedIn. As you've heard Trevor saying, please stop taking yourself too seriously. And while you're at it, just hit the subscribe button to keep exploring all the hero's journeys that we present here on the Online Prosperity Show, because from what I've heard, in the next episode, we're going to be diving into ideas that will help you build not just a career, but also a happier existence. And I just want you to start thinking mindset shifts, life design hacks, small wins that stick. So stick around and make sure you're in our circle. Well, we got to go now. I mean, as Trevor said, things have to have a start and an end. And I think this is the end of this project that me and Trevor have been working on. All right. So I also encourage you to go check out the Disgruntled PM podcast on Spotify and YouTube. And maybe you can also break some records in your area that nobody can ever take away from you. So until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep forging your own prosperity. Bye for now.